Just a reminder, I'll be on Friday.
Yep.
So thanks for letting me know.
I'll be on Friday as well. I'm already traveling for baseball, but I've already taken the quiz and I think I'm perfect. For the papers.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye, man. See you on Friday.
Yes. See you then. Thanks.
Have a good day.
Thanks too. All right. Good afternoon. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and get started. So for today's class, we're going to be building off of our discussion on Monday about small groups and meetings, right? We don't like meetings a lot of the time when we're in work meetings. Meetings don't feel the most efficient. We've probably had a couple horror stories of meetings we've been involved in, especially online, that can be difficult. But this week, our goal is if we're ever hosting and being in charge of a meeting, it's helping us develop skills for how to do that better. And if we're involved as a participant in the meeting, there are things that we can do too to make that process go as smoothly as we can. So last class, we talked a little bit about group meetings, when we should hold group meetings, and some of the ideas behind the benefits that meetings can give, like synergy and problem solving. I also want to remind everybody that the small group assessment is due on Sunday. So that's coming up, and you're still welcome to turn in a rough draft or outline if you would like. I'd just like to make sure that you have that to me by Friday so that I can give you some feedback. And this assessment, the prompt is available on Canvas, but it involves you thinking about some of the activities that we've done in class. In addition to all of these, we also had Monday's scenario where I was asking you to think about how you could prepare for a special guest presenter on the EOU campus and how we could do things such as coordinating logistics, travel, decision-making, and so forth into that process. So you might think about your involvement in that one as well if you're looking for another thing to draw from for that assignment. Also know, this week's quiz is due on Sunday, right? It was posted after class on Monday, so you still have some time to continue to work through that. Last class, we talked a little bit about the idea of preparing for meetings to make sure that meetings go well, right? There's a lot of different things that we can do to make sure that our meetings run smoothly. A lot of that means preparing, coming early, being respectful. recognizing that our slice of pie in meetings is smaller, right? We're talking for less time. So we have to make sure that our points that we're raising in the meeting are relevant, significant, and add to the conversation. We also talked last class about some of the guidelines and goals of holding meetings, right? The idea of creating a clear agenda that's sent out in advance that people can receive. The people are arriving early, that people know what to expect and what content that they need in order to come to the meeting effectively. And the idea that if you're efficient and use your time well, the meeting can end early. That can be a reward for people who are efficiently working through this. Today, we're going to be talking a bit more about how we facilitate meetings. In other words, if you are running a meeting, how do you make sure that your meeting goes smoothly? What are some best practices and things that you can do? But if you're a participant in the meeting, there's also steps that you can take to be involved effectively in that meeting and ensure that the meeting is going the way that you hope it is. We'll also talk about how we can engage in effective meetings and run them well in a virtual environment too, using features such as Zoom. Before we get started on that, does anybody have any questions about anything we talked about last class or anything about the small group assessment that's coming up? Great. Questions do come up, let me know. As a reminder, I am asking you to cite as you're working through that small group assessment, and the Canvas announcement has that full in-text or full works cited in APA so that you can use that as you're working through. So for today, I think it's useful for us to think about meeting facilitation and why it matters, right? The worst feeling is to be stuck in meetings that feel pointless, that feel boring, and to feel like nothing was accomplished through the process of participating in that meeting. So there's a lot of different things that we can do to help to avoid that. And one thing that I think is useful is to think about group meetings in terms of past, present, and future, right? In other words, our time and labor is oftentimes pretty evenly split between preparing for meetings, running the meeting, and following up. We talk about preparing for a meeting, talked a fair bit about that in this class, but it's the idea of figuring out and developing an agenda. What are the important items? Things that we need to decide on, things that we need to work through together, things that we want to make sure that people in the group are able to do. Your practice, preparing for the next competition or game. If you're involved in a work-related meeting, ensuring that you're reaching the decisions. Who are you hiring for the job? What issues do you need to discuss and work through? We talked last class about assigning tasks and responsibilities. So using that initial time to get all the logistical elements like the agenda in order, securing a date, time, location for the meeting too, sending updates such as an email or reminder, sending out some notes that can ensure that the meeting goes smoothly when it happens. If you're a participant, right, it's thinking about what you can do to ensure that you're coming into the meeting prepared. Perhaps there is a meeting where you're asked to give an update. And everybody is giving an update about how their projects are going. And if you say, wow, I didn't realize I was going to have to give an update. Let's see, right? And you're taking a lot of time to figure out what to say, it's going to hold up the entire meeting, right? So even if we're a participant, reading through the agenda, making sure we know the date, time, location, getting all of that worked out, fielding questions ahead of time if you have a concern about anything in the meeting or can't access anything in the meeting is an important step in the meeting prep process. Then there's running the meeting, right? If you're running a meeting, you're a facilitator, that's going to take up a good bit of your time. You have to account for people who might be coming in late, people who are in the meeting for the first time. Maybe there's a disruption or tech issue that's impacting your ability to hold this meeting and get people there who need to be there. So there are a lot of issues that can happen during the meeting itself. You're trying to get the meeting moving along. You're trying to update people. Perhaps you're getting people to vote on a topic or issue that's important. So getting the meeting run effectively is important as well. And then follow-up, right? So there are a few important reasons why following up on a meeting can be really, really, really useful. The first one is paper trail, right? We have seen a lot of companies, a lot of businesses, and a lot of controversy that has surrounded the practices that businesses, companies still want to do. And what is the easiest way to confirm that? Well, to have a written report and confirmation as to what transpired. You don't have minutes and you don't have a kind of summary of the meeting or recording of the meeting. Oftentimes controversy and problems can devolve into a he said, she said. Or Meetings that are recorded or meetings that have an agenda posted later are useful for people who were not able to come to those meetings so that they can refresh. And it helps us to make sure that we're all in agreement about what just happened in the previous meeting so that we all have a good starting place for the next meeting, right? So one thing that we commonly do in meetings is the first thing that we do is look at and approve the minutes from the previous meeting. And in doing that, it not only lets us all get up to speed if we have people who missed the previous meeting, but it also makes sure that we can have a discussion about previous topics or issues, make sure that we've resolved disagreement, and make sure we all have a starting point for future discussion that ensures that there's agreement among people in the group, right? So our ability to do that upfront work to follow up on a meeting can be really useful. It can also be really good to help make sure that people know the tasks and responsibilities that they were asked to do. We talked last class, if you are in charge of this guest speaker, right? Are you charged with getting them from the airport? Are you in charge of meals? You signed up to do something. It's good to have a written confirmation that you did it so that everybody agrees and has everything together, right? So meeting follow-up is really useful. It helps make sure that we all have summed up the meeting and are in agreement about what happened during the meeting. So all these chunks go into thinking about facilitating a meeting effectively. So chances are you've been involved in a bad meeting or likely will be in the future, right? You know it when you see it. There are a lot of different things that make for bad and ineffective meetings. I really enjoyed the video clip we saw last class about the ways that people were stuck on an agenda. And I wanted to share another one that I think does a good job of discussing and breaking down some of the elements of bad and ineffective group meetings in kind of a funny way.
Now, we can see that Q3 revenue fell well below predictions. We have all seen the numbers here.
The data shows that customer retention was a tricky area. If you follow this line.
Boo! Boo! Come on, Gibbons, nobody can see that. You should have sent it out in advance.
I can make copies.
You don't know how to use the machine. You don't. And the rest of you, where is the energy? Where is the focus? Come on, let's pick up the pace, eh? Come on, woo! Teamwork here. He's a big fan of the company. Jonesy! Woohoo! Take us to the next item on the agenda. Just chicken in, man. You're the greatest. Right, well, yes, we don't have a formal agenda per se. Oh, you stink, Jonesy! A foul! After foul! This is not how you lead a team. What kind of meeting is this? Nobody understands what it's for. But that's not true. Of course they do. Tell me what our objective is.
Well, I don't even really understand what to do here.
You meetings, long, tedious meetings that amount to nothing. I'm seeing no structure, sloppy preparation. Nobody is prepared to attack the goal. I've spent too long rooting for this company to watch it fall apart. We've had a bad face off, but we're still in it.
So kind of a silly example here of a very excited fan stepping into a meeting, right? So a lot of the points that he raises about the meeting not going well, I think are things that we can apply here. For example, right, he's in the back, he doesn't have access to the slides or material. Good idea to print out or have some of those things available in advance. Also a really good accessibility feature because there might be people in your group who use a screen reader, folks that might be blind or have vision impairments, need sort of good access to audio and other resources. So checking in about accessibility is really important. Also, right, having an agenda, having structure is important. So making sure that people understand why they're there and are able to achieve goals are really important things for us to establish. So one big problem that can happen in group meetings is people who are making arguments about established facts, right? That's a very circular and difficult way for people to move forward about an issue. If we don't agree that something is true, then we're not going to be able to move forward on other topics, right? That's a source of a lot of social and political disagreement. If we do not believe that an event is occurring, then we're not going to see that event as significant or important for the group. So using things like an agenda, like minutes, to make sure that everybody understands and is in agreement before moving forward can be a really good thing, right? So we don't necessarily like facts, right? But the facts and the information we have are useful for us to move forward in the discussion. Similarly, there's a logical fallacy known as begging the question, which involves us presenting a statement or a point that assumes that that's true when it might not be, right? If we were talking about having a booth for our club on Spring Symposium, right? We might say, well, we know that we can't do a booth, but maybe we could do it next year, right? What do you mean we know that we can't do a booth? Why are you saying that we know that? We haven't talked about that yet, right? So introducing an opinion and presenting it as if it's a taken for granted agreement among everybody can be a way to really encourage and derail the conversation. You're not able to move forward because this is how it is, but we haven't discussed it. Intimidating other people with knowledge, right? So this is an issue of credibility and using that in a way that can block our discussion. So it's useful to use ethos, talk about your own credibility and background on an issue. That might mean that you're more qualified to talk about an issue, but you can take that in a negative direction if you're using that credibility and background as a way of stifling conversation. For example, you were to say, well, I was the only one who was at this meeting, so I'm the only one who can talk about this. Or saying, well, I'm the only one here in this room who knows how to use Microsoft Excel, so I don't think that we should do this, right? It's good to use credibility, but not in a way that's trying to prevent other people from contributing to the conversation. An alternative way to rephrase would be to say, I'm pretty knowledgeable in Excel. I don't think this is a good idea, but I could talk through it and see if other people are in agreement, right? Opening things up a bit more. How many people have ever heard of the filibuster? Not very many of you. In the US Senate, right, there is what's known as a filibuster, which essentially means that Congress is continuing to debate and discuss a particular bill because they haven't been able to end the discussion and reach closure, right? So typically on a lot of non-economic issues and outside of some major policies, they need to reach 60 votes in order to end debate and actually move forward to passing something. So what that means in practice is that a lot of legislation does require 60 votes in order to pass in the Senate, right? So the ability to discuss a topic endlessly can prevent anything from happening, right? That's strategically used by both major political parties in a lot of different ways. Another strategy that's used a lot of times in Congress is to overwhelm with kind of vote-a-rama or amendment-a-rama, right? Where there might be a controversial or important topic, and people bring in amendments or changes to that bill, and they bring in so many with the goal of preventing it from passing at all, the goal of perhaps getting some of the amendments through that people want, throw it at the wall, see what sticks, or people might try to muscle through a lot of different pieces of agenda or a lot of items without giving people the time to actually sit down, look at, or read any of them, right? Oftentimes when there's pressure to get a lot forward, including some things that might be more controversial, and there's not time to actually read over, discuss, or debate them, overwhelming with proposals is a strategy that's used, particularly at the last minute. We have to get this through. We have to pass this. We have to do this, right? And nobody gets the chance to understand what the heck they're doing. So that can be a problem. Another problem in meetings is anger for no reason, right? A lot of us might have issues or problems going on, right? But somebody brings in frustration that in no way connects to the content of the meeting. That can be a really big problem. My way or the highway, right? Saying nobody can play with my ball anymore, I'm taking it home. That can be a problem. People might be frustrated or upset if they are a dissenting voice in a vote, or consensus was reached but you don't agree. But our ability to come to the table and work through something, even if we're not the biggest fan of it, is something that we oftentimes have to do in work and professional settings. Avoiding a "I told you so," but instead allowing people to work together, even if they're going in a different direction than what you would want. Another tactic, and one that can oftentimes be used in stalling, is demanding more information than you need. Say we were going to build new wind turbines in Eastern Oregon, and we needed to conduct a study looking at its environmental impact, its impact on property in the area. Okay, great. If you have done that research and you continuously say, well, we need more information, we need to do another study, we need to do a longitudinal study, we need at least 10 years, right? And you draw that out endlessly, the way of preventing it from happening at all, right? So demanding more information than would be reasonable for you as a person in the group to make a decision is another strategy that hurts. And then a circular discussion of reasoning, right? So circular reasoning means that you are using your argument to justify your argument, where you say, for instance, well, we haven't had success with a booth, so we shouldn't use a booth, and we shouldn't use a booth for a club because we haven't had success with it, right? You're like reinforcing yourself at the same point over and over again. That can be a problem with groups that appeal to tradition. This is how we've done something in the past, so it's how we'll do it again. Breaking out of that allows groups to think outside of the box a bit more and come up with more creative solutions to problems, right? So these are problems that can emerge in how groups are run and the quality of discussion that can happen if a group meeting is not facilitated well. So another issue here is to think about facilitation and the ways that we can make effective facilitation happen. One of the biggest issues here is to start on time. So starting on time is helpful for a lot of reasons. First of all, it saves everybody time and it sets an expectation about how a group can behave. One thing that I've noticed that is kind of like a time creep that tends to happen is that there might be crucially important people for a meeting who don't show up on time. So you think, okay, well, we'll start the meeting a bit late. And then what happens? Well, those people show up later and later. Other people start showing up late because they know the meeting is not going to actually start until later. And so you get this cycle of people continuing to come in late in a way that doesn't really make sense, right? So one workaround for this is if you're facilitating a meeting and you know that when the time has started, there are some people that should be here but aren't. One thing you can do is move ahead to another agenda item or topic, or perhaps a more casual area of discussion that doesn't require the presence of everybody else, so that when other people show up, you're able to go back to them. For example, maybe you are hosting a guest presenter who's supposed to come at noon, start out the meeting, but they're not there yet, right? And they're having trouble finding the building. Perhaps you get started on some of the other items on the agenda, and then, oh, look, it's 12:15, the guest speaker is here. You've already made some progress, so you can have the guest speaker share, and then once they're done, right, you're through more of the meeting and you can still be on track. So starting on time is important, or else you normalize more and more the time not being used effectively. Starting with something positive. So I'm a part of a research group. We're a whole bunch of nerds who really like to talk about rhetoric and chemistry and health. The facilitator of our meeting did something really silly and did a meeting where we were all supposed to come in dressed up as one of the elements in the periodic table. Did I mention that we're nerds? So like we had somebody who came in and they had a whole bunch of balloons that they were holding because they were helium. It was really silly, but it was a great way to set the tone for the meeting. Housekeeping, right? Housekeeping involves some of the rudimentary tasks, such as voting on minutes from the previous meeting, taking attendance or polling people who were there, doing like a tech check or mic check or audio check, making sure that people have access to everything that they need. Like the basic stuff like that is a good thing to start out with, because oftentimes kind of a Maslow's hierarchy issue, if you don't resolve those crucial things early on, people are going to be anxious about that for the rest of the meeting. If somebody is like, well, I didn't get an agenda, what's going on, right? They're going to be anxious for the entire rest of the meeting because they didn't have that early. Defining your roles clearly is a good idea here, right? Making sure that people know what they're doing in that meeting. I will tell you, if you're facilitating a meeting, you should not also be the one that's taking minutes. Facilitating is a pretty demanding job, especially if you're working with a larger group or people who disagree. Giving people the chance to be facilitated by you and giving another person a chance to take notes can be a good way to divvy up the responsibilities. Don't put it all on you or you're going to come up short. Keeping to your agenda and guiding is important here, right? So for instance, you might say we're now on agenda item 3, which is this, and using that signposting is really good to make sure that people know. It's also really good when you have cases of people who are adding points onto an issue that's already been discussed and resolved. We're on agenda item 3, so you don't need to talk about agenda item 1 anymore, right? If you're done with that part of the conversation. So allowing people to follow along is important. It also helps them know how far along they are in the meeting, right? Guiding is useful. For instance, you might tell people in the meeting, okay, it sounds like we're all in agreement about candidate A being a good choice for this job. Does that sound about right? That helps to make sure that you're all on the same page. That's the idea of a perception check, of checking in on the group about how people are agreeing and working together in the group, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and understanding each other. Nos do so. Nobody speaks twice until everybody speaks once. That's something we've talked about earlier in the class. But creating the opportunity for everybody to participate so you don't have people who feel disconnected or unable to share their points of view, or people who dominate the discussion is an important strategy. So asking people who haven't spoken yet to address issues or signing people to speak is a strategy that can help a lot to address that issue as well. So there are a few other things that we can do for effective facilitation, right? One of them is making sure that we're assigning and capturing some of the key items during the meeting, right? So last class, we all did this by figuring out some of the responsibilities and tasks that we should do if we're hosting this guest presenter on campus. Another thing is to make it fun and healthy, right? Giving perhaps a break, giving casual conversation, letting people get coffee, stretch their legs. Those things are good for their health, but also good for the group. In fact, using things like icebreakers and fun activities seems like it might be a waste of time, but from an industry or company perspective, it can actually make the work that the group does more efficient because they've had the chance to get to know each other, they trust each other better, we're building rapport, and so the work that they do is more efficient. Avoiding sarcasm and cynicism, especially if you're a facilitator or leader, right? You might crack a joke or two, but you don't want to be here and you're communicating that you don't want to be here. The members of the group certainly don't want to be there. Why are you here running this meeting if you don't even want to be, right? So if you start your meeting by saying, I'm just here so I don't get fined, it's not going to go well. Using quick wins. This is a really good strategy. A lot of group meetings are very momentum driven, right? So starting out with easier, less cognitively challenging items, things like agenda, or voting of minutes from the previous meeting, things that are uncontroversial, they're simple, they're straightforward. Starting that out not only clears your plate better to discuss the more controversial topics later, but it also has the benefit of building momentum. Okay, we agree on this and this, we're working together, we're making progress. So when people come to a more difficult task, they're doing so with the goodwill they've created with each other earlier on. Regular breaks is a good idea. A good rule of thumb is not to let any segment of time go past about 45 minutes to an hour without having some type of break for people to catch their breath, get a drink of water, go to the bathroom, all of that. Respect is important. It's also important for us to prepare for things going south, right? So ever since I was a grad student, my backpack had an assortment of USB drives, HDMI ports, of all of that stuff. And even a dry erase marker, knowing that if things went south with like visuals and presentation, that there'd be a backup option available. Assessments can be a really good thing to do after a meeting. For example, doing a follow-up survey. Zoom has a feature where people can do a poll after a meeting too. All of that stuff can be a really good way of checking in and seeing if people are on the same page, seeing what you can do to change the meeting and so on. To allow the meeting to go better, and thinking and talking ahead, right? Looking to the future, looking to the next meeting. You might start from a deadline and work backwards. What do you and your group need to do between now and then to get to the goals that you want to get to? The last major area before an intense activity for the day is talking about virtual facilitation, right? So a lot of us were involved in meetings switched to Zoom and other platforms over the last 2 or 3 years. And even as we return to more face-to-face contexts, there are still going to be a lot of meetings that are held virtually, held remotely. You'll likely be involved in those going forward as people are navigating distance, the efficiency of being in your own home or space. So virtual facilitation is an important skill for us to develop too. There are a few different things that we can do here. One of them is to get everybody to say something, right? So making sure that all members are participating is not only good to ensure inclusion, but is also good in order to create like a tech or mic check. So you might have everybody go around and introduce themselves to make sure that everybody is able to participate in the group. Reminding people of the purpose and outcomes. Why are we here? Reinforcing that over and over is especially important. I have been involved in the last 2 or 3 years in a lot of remote meetings. And I can tell you that oftentimes you just click the link and hop in, and you forget from all the meetings that you've had what that meeting was even about. Why are we here? What's going on? Right? So differentiate your meeting. Providing insight from people who aren't participating, right? So there's a good rule of thumb. You give a name and you give a purpose, right? So you say, John, what are your thoughts on our use of technology, right? You might provide that person with a prompt they can use in order to address that, right? So that can be a good way to help to keep pace of the meeting. I also wanted to share a short video that I think highlights some other good practices of how we can allow other people to be involved in meetings effectively.
And set up your store on a single.
The first mistake people make in an online meeting is it makes it too rigid. If there's something like just reading off a PowerPoint slide, or that one person is speaking the whole time, kind of like a monologue, this is something to avoid. The thing that you need to do is focus on control. Now you control based on the opening of the meeting. How do you set up the agenda? But you can also maintain control based on the questions that you ask and politely interrupting somebody using mirroring. You're keeping the momentum based on different types of engagement. You call out people by name, or you ask the group a certain question. You have different techniques to keep everybody on the same page. And finally, is that it's very easy to become distracted. Now you can do this on your own if the technology is not set up, or if you don't double check everybody else's audio settings or sound settings, then things can derail. Make sure that you've done enough prep up front and that you structure it so that everybody knows what the expectations are, and that you minimize any distractions that you can through asking questions or understanding the technology from before the meeting starts, during the meeting, and then setting up very clear action items on who is doing what next.
So I think that does a good job of highlighting some ways to run meetings effectively online, right? Tech issues and other problems can be a big source of distraction. If there's ringing sounds, that can really hurt the ability of the meeting to go well. If somebody's desyncing, right, that can be a distraction from their message. The presenter also brought up the idea of mirroring, right? Mirroring is generally when we're like reiterating or paraphrasing what somebody else said, or kind of mimicking their participation and facial expressions. We're regurgitating what the last person said over and over. We're spinning our wheels and not making progress. So it's a good idea to move on from that if it feels like we're doing too much of that in the group. So discouraging people calling in, right? People who randomly jump in and out of meetings is important unless they let you know in advance. In fact, a good thing to do is to let people know if you need to leave. If you want to avoid interrupting a conversation, you might use the chat feature. That can be a good way to make sure that you're not interrupting the conversation as it's happening if you need to exit that meeting. And then using cues, right? Again, we have less nonverbal communication, especially if we're only using audio. So we want to make sure that we are very clear with our intentions. I was not trying to be sarcastic in this. I simply said that I think we should go a different direction, right? So making sure that we're as clear as possible with our communication is important online, knowing that there's going to be more that's lost as we're navigating all of these boxes in a two-dimensional space. So what I would like you to do for your attendance for today is to take some time on this scenario. So you get to facilitate a meeting for a club or activity here at EOU that is your choice. And what I want you to think about here is, first of all, what are some of the bad habits of group meeting facilitation that you can avoid doing? So the things that we've talked about that you should not do during a meeting. Second of all, what are some good practices of group meeting facilitation that you could incorporate? Explain some of the things that you would do to help the meeting go well. And then lastly, if you had a virtual meeting, you're using a platform like Zoom or Google Meets or something similar, what could you do to make that virtual meeting go smoothly? So I'll give you some time to work on this prompt, and then I'll ask us to share some of our ideas together. Give you about 2 more minutes to work through this. Go ahead and finish up your current thought or idea here. So what I'd like us to do is to go around the room and when we get to you, share what the group was that you chose to facilitate. And second of all, what is one thing that you plan to do in order to make that group facilitation go well? We'll start here on the second one. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry to put you on the spot. We'll go back.
Okay, so the club or activity of my choice was a Bible study group that I'm a part of. And what I will try avoid doing with like the bad habits is like circular discussion and like not repeating what's already been said or anything, just kind of helping make sure that the group is moving forward to the point and that what we're trying to accomplish and being accomplished. To facilitate a good meeting, to just sort of make sure things are fun and interesting for everyone, that we're not getting burned out, taking too long on a meeting, that we're taking breaks and that kind of.
It could be good for us to be in the nice place of, wow, we agree, we're on the same page, right? And as a result, we get stuck in that, right? So finding that place to continue to move on and recognize, well, we're in agreement here, but we don't want to fixate on the thing we're in agreement about. We've got to keep going. Is a challenging thing to do. So good points here. Yeah, go for it.
So I chose my group that I'm in PhD club. And so for the first one I put, I would discourage like one-sided views. And then the second, I would say, make sure everybody speaks. And then for the third one, we were like online. Make sure that we have like purpose for it.
Yeah. So all being understanding about what's going on and why.
I chose like soccer meeting, like just with players. It's going to be important too. Make sure that everybody has a voice, no matter like. Yeah, like it'd be bad situation to like only let like captains talk.
Yeah. so thinking about the role of power, sometimes people don't feel like they have the opportunity to contribute, but letting people jump in helps them to continue to be involved and participate.
Yeah, I kind of like something I did the baseball team, is that there's someone a meeting or something, I would just focus on like everyone having an opinion or something to say during the meeting. Like there's kind of ideas going all the time and quietness. And yeah, I just like do like held online, maybe like just be sure with your own time, check with beforehand, that's all.
Because those problems online, right, can easily become a really big source of frustration. We're at the point now where a lot of people like sigh and get frustrated every time those recurring issues happen. I've seen a lot of people who like have Zoom bingo cards of like all the things that go wrong in those types of meetings. So not reverting to that. Yeah, yeah, like, somebody like the seance, are you there? Are you there, Bob? Bob, are you with us? Like, that's an item. There's a whole bunch of other ones that I thought were pretty funny. Yeah, what are some of your thoughts here about how to facilitate a good meeting?
For me, I with my old scout again, how for any of the actual focusing on the fact that we have about it, comes with that, so we for any possible actual activities and that's for the whole and how to integrate with knowledge and anybody gets checked with the actual we stated as whether their opinions or actual fact we work with and they're really relative to you. So
Yeah.
For number two, is mainly just keeping on schedule and try not to be stuck there where we are when all pissed at each other at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We need to be able to work going forward. Number three was really just trying to make sure everybody's actually there, keeping track of camera, questions and actually asking for feedback and something like feedback, but how, what do you think, why? And we'll just check the equipment beforehand.
Yeah. So in particular, right, making sure that people have common knowledge and resources. Because when people come in and they like have some report or information that nobody else has access to, it's not only alienating, there's some FOMO, but we also get frustration because we feel like we can't participate in the same way as this person has a leg up. Okay.
I just kind of looked at it generally.
Sure.
And I was just thinking like the meetings that I held in the past, and especially in high school. So like I thought some of the big issues are jumping around.
Yes.
Was that people can be formally during the meeting, just want to jump from topic to topic and jump right back to the topic they were talking before, like 5 minutes later. Makes it very difficult to follow and get things done. I said lack of a clear agenda or itinerary is a big problem that plagues. Well, general lack of structure and so constant distractions and off course viewing. I find people have a tendency to be distracted easily.
Yeah.
during all boring meetings. And no goals, no specified goals can often be a problem. Then inefficiency. And then so meetings generally inefficient because of the reasons I mentioned before, and they sort of assume they got more work done than they really did.
Yep.
Like we mentioned earlier in class, big thing, you sort of assume you got more work than you really did.
Yeah.
And then for solutions, I said like a clear and concise itinerary, goals and targets for what the meeting is supposed to establish, sure everyone's on the same boat. Keeping people involved through a variety of teams, breaks, discussions about different topics, so not one person is dominating the monologue. So like a lack of monologues, again, ensuring participation by, again, asking questions and facilitating discussions and to go further, limit blocking, make sure people aren't on the discussion, and then don't put people down to incentivize them to actually speak up.
Yeah. In particular, right, jumping around between agenda items is definitely a big problem. Sometimes we do and we need to, right? We don't have the person we need for this one, so we got to move forward, but it's about being clear and signposting for people following why we're on this topic. Where are we? Why are we here? Right? And making that clear to the group for sure. Nick?
For my group, I chose the navigators.
Mhm.
Most of my answers are more general, but I'll make some of my answers specifically about, but the general ones of bad habits include preparation, like not having an established schedule, having it more free flow, then allow
meetings to go way longer than it should be.
Mhm.
We want to have a friendly environment and have people open to any ideas from any participants. But the bad habit is not having a clear agenda or purpose of the meeting. And those periods of irrelevant information where they're just spouting on things that don't really relate.
Yeah.
Having good meeting facilitation to include things being related to school functions or cultural activities.
Mhm.
Like even to the auditor sport. There's the not so all the.
Mhm.
all the stuff that-
Nobody speaks twice until everybody's spoken once. Yeah.
And to allow breaks if meetings take a long period.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
For the final one, we do this help virtually. Things to help the meeting run smoothly to include technical preparation, encouraging people to participate.
So oftentimes people like to free associate, right? They say what immediately comes to their minds without really thinking it through. And that can work well one-on-one, but in a group setting can really hurt the quality of the discussion for sure. So for the remaining folks, share one thing that you would do to help to facilitate that meeting.
So I showed how I use study period and I'd like to help facilitate it. I'll make sure like everybody knows the place that it's gonna be and make sure that we take time for breaks and make sure that everybody gets a chance to like voice their questions and so we can like help each other understand it.
People will, for example, about training, people will use their bags. Something about that, like. They were overwhelmed with
Yeah, people need time to really understand what's going on here.
So I chose the Student for Defensible Drug Policy, which is a drug policy group I used to be in. And so one of the biggest things with that is like people tend to do emotional stuff or have arguments that are like not helpful for harm reduction. What's about harm reduction and science behind it, and when people do that, so just leading it away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping it focused on the issues and topics at hand, knowing there are emotionally charged issues happening elsewhere. Nicholas?
I chose the hiking club. The big one that I thought would be very good to help facilitate it is the nobody speaks twice until everyone speaks once.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that, oftentimes your meeting is just ran by about
Yeah.
a third of your group, and everyone else just stays quiet.
It's one of those things that's good to nip in the bud because it can easily just be the pattern every single time afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, along the same stuff as everyone else. I felt like one of the more important points was that if it's like a recreation-based club, you're definitely going to want to keep the atmosphere still enjoyable and light. Because if everyone's miserable in your recreational club, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. It should not be a dour environment. It's
Be
gotta
an
be fun.
ordeal,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I just came up with like getting up behind four mates. Make sure you're there on time. But no excuse to open it. Because we all met up, but we all have valuable things about something.
Helps us to understand where everybody is coming from rather than a single. Yeah.
So the main one I was focused on was, making sure that meetings aren't claiming food, because I treated it always in my book club.
Yeah.
And making sure that everybody understands that their views of it matter, and that not one person is absolutely true, because it is an opinion and your thoughts on the book.
Yeah. And Kelly, we'll save your voice, but I really appreciated these thoughts here, right? You all speaking to the importance of including voices and making sure the voices are being represented, the importance of staying on task, using things like agendas that are provided early so that we know date, time, location, and all of that stuff are all crucial skills. So we talked about effective group facilitation, some of the steps that are needed to make that happen. On Friday, we'll be looking at structure and organization for meetings and ways to make sure that those meetings are going well. Please email or pass forward your attendance for the day. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and I'll see you again on Friday. just for fun. Thanks, you too. So yes, Zoom bingo. Hey, I have another call. Sorry, you go ahead. Blank, you're muted. I'm gonna turn it over to Blank.
I wish I had this during high school. If I'd
Yeah.
known this had existed, I definitely would have used it and laughed every time I had a call.
Makes meetings a lot more fun in the worst way.
Yeah.
Yeah.